Good morning, Houdat Nation and Bayou Blitz family. Welcome to week 2 of the NFL season, and a special welcome to the week 2 Bayou Blitz pregame show. I am Bob Rose. I'm one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz pregame extravaganza. Joining me is my equally hyped up partner, Brendan Boylan. Happy week 2, Brendan.
Yeah, week 2. Hyped up because I'm on cup of coffee number... I don't know. Where are you at? That's the more important thing. Where's Bob at this morning?
I gotta believe I'm an 8 or 9.
So like an entire pot just for Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Standard.
Yeah, I don't have that. I don't have that going for me. Not quite yet. A couple shots of espresso. I think I'm probably like 3 shots of espresso, maybe 4 in. So I'm good to go for the rest of the day, hopefully. Some Saints are ready to go for today's matchup. Some are not. We have the inactive report that just dropped. Bob Rose. I guess this is becoming your weekly thing, your weekly segment, if you will. The inactive report with Bob Rose.
I mean, to be fair, I had word of a couple of these players, within the last 30 minutes. But other than that, the full inactive report, I'm stealing from John Hendricks of the Saints News Network, who, of course, is at today's game in Arlington, Texas. Biggest news, Talise Fuaga, rookie left tackle, first-round pick, is active. And is expected to start. Now, Fuaga went through pregame warmups. Obviously, he looked good enough to go, but his status is definitely worth watching, especially against that pair of Dallas edge rushers, which we'll preview in a moment. The full inactive report. I gave you the good news. Now I'll give you the bad news. Marshon Lattimore is inactive. Will not play with that hamstring injury of his. So we expect to see a lot more reps from rookie second-round pick Kool-Aid McKinstry. Probably some little bit of Rico Payton, for you fans of that preseason sensation. And obviously a lot of Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor. So that's another big matchup to watch in the secondary when Dak Prescott drops back to throw. One surprising inactive to me was A.T. Perry. The wide receiver, again, inactive with a hand. Dallin Holker, the rookie tight end, still inactive with that ankle injury. DeMarco Jackson, inactive once again. And, of course, there's no surprise, Kalen Saunders still can't go because of that calf injury. The official number 2 quarterback for the New Orleans Saints this afternoon will be Jake Haener. Spencer Rattler, just like week 1, was deemed officially inactive, but listed as the emergency quarterback. And you and I outlined what that means if Spencer Rattler comes into the game several times, Brendan.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have to do it several times throughout the remainder of the season. But nonetheless, I mean, no surprises for the most part outside of Marshon Lattimore. That is concerning, might not be the best word to use because it is early in the season. If this would be later in the season, would he play? I mean, that's a whole debate. But there were some reports last night that it was so early in the season. Did they want to risk it with a guy like Lattimore? It makes sense. But you are facing a Dallas offense with some really good receivers. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb. You also have Brandon Cooks facing off against the team that drafted him. But, Bob, we have praised the New Orleans Saints secondary for most of the offseason into week 1 and now into week 2 as being one of the deepest and strongest units.
Yeah.
What's going to be really interesting, and I think I know the answer, I think you know the answer to this as well, is a common Saints fan would probably ask the question, well, is Alontae Taylor going to bump outside, or is he going to stay in his kind of nickel spot, if you will? I think it's safe to say, based off what we know and what we've seen, Taylor will likely stay in that spot with the upgrade of Kool-Aid McKinstry into being the number 2 corner. Do you read that to be the same way, Bob?
Yeah, I feel like it will be. Not just Kool-Aid, but Rico Payton might get a shot outside too. Alante's just coming along so well in the slot. And as we saw last week with his 3 sacks against Carolina and down the stretch of last year, Dennis Allen and Joe Woods like to move Alante around a little bit. Like to make defenses guess where he's coming from, what they're doing with him. So I expect that to be the same today. But I also expect the Saints to run a lot of nickel packages today. We've praised the New Orleans secondary not only for their coverage ability, but also their abilities in run support. And while the Dallas Cowboys don't have the worst running game in the league, we know that this Dallas offense is going to live and die on the arm and passing abilities of Dak Prescott and the receiving skills of C.D. Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert. So I expect a lot of what the Saints have run the last several years. 2 linebackers, extra defensive back, dropping an extra DB, whether it's Tyrann Mathieu, Jordan Howden, or Alante Taylor down into the box on early downs. So yeah, I agree that I believe that Alante is going to stay primarily as your slot coverage guy, but he's going to see an awful lot of action today.
Just going to have to. Let's keep it on the Saints defense. Last week, they performed extremely well, forcing 3 turnovers and really disrupting anything that the Panthers wanted to do. We mentioned throughout the week this week that this is a Panthers group that probably didn't get to really see what they wanted to out of their running backs simply because they were down as much as they were so early. I think it was 11 combined carries between Sanders and Hubbard last week. That's not going to be the same case this week against the Dallas Cowboys, at least going into it. I mean, if the Saints were to go up big again, we're not complaining. The Saints aren't complaining. But I do think you're going to see a heavy dose of the running attack for the Cowboys that looks a little different than it has in years past. A lot of people were really high on and still are really high on Tony Pollard, who's no longer there. But you have Ezekiel Elliott, who comes back. He scores in his, what you don't call it a debut. Is it a second debut? Is it a return to
a review?
A review. I like that. We just invented a word today. A review for Ezekiel Elliott. Obviously, Dak Prescott has shown that he has enough mobility to get around and create with his legs. How vital is it that the defensive line has another strong performance today? Not just the pass, but the run as well.
Yeah, absolutely crucial. And to me, it's more the latter against the run than it is the pass. Against Dallas, you have to make them one-dimensional. Again, I fully stand by what I just said, that the Cowboys are going to live and die by their passing game, but they do like to try to maintain balance and at least establish the threat of a run. So if the Saints can eliminate that early, that increases the pressure on Dak Prescott, who we know, whether you like or dislike Dak as a player, you have to acknowledge that he is at best inconsistent in crunch time, when he's forced to throw the ball on nearly every down. And then obviously getting after Dak, with your pass rushers too, not only along the edge, but also interior. You got to get in Dak Prescott's face. If you do, he's going to throw a couple of questionable balls, but you need to pressure him from the outside too. You can't let him escape containment because he's good enough to make plays with his legs. I do expect the Saints, who blitzed a lot last week on Bryce Young, I expect them to blitz fairly heavily again this week. At least keep that Cowboys offensive line that has 3 new pieces up front, 2 new rookies, and then another player similar to the Saints playing in a new position. So essentially 3 new pieces. You want to throw a lot of different exotic packages at them, make them think blitz and back off at the last second, bring blitzers from different directions. Obviously that keeps the quarterback guessing, and changing his reads on the fly, but it also keeps the other offensive line off balance with their blocking schemes and things like that, and really test the cohesiveness, to a position that again is going to have, really 3 new players, going for them today.
And final question about this Cowboys offense before we switch it over to the Saints offense. For the Saints defense, we already mentioned Marshawn Lattimore going to be out, a vital piece. But the Saints, it kind of hurts to say, but if you're a Saints fan, and it's going to hurt to hear it as well if you're a Saints fan, but the Saints have almost got used to playing without Marshawn Lattimore for extended stretches throughout the last few years. Maybe the biggest knock on Lattimore has been his ability to stay healthy. How does that change any mindset the Saints defense has? How does that change the mindset of the Cowboys passing attack? And are you going to be looking towards CeeDee Lamb or Brandon Cooks to maybe step up and create more opportunities for Dak Prescott because they're not going to have the pressure of playing against, when healthy, one of the best cover corners in football?
Well, like you said, and I love Marshawn Lattimore as a player. And I think he's still a top 3 cornerback in this league. But the Saints have certainly gotten used to not playing without him. Remember, he missed almost half the last half of the season last year. 10 games the year before that. So the equivalent of 1 year has been missed of the last 2 seasons. And in the process, that's allowed Alontae Taylor to step up, particularly 2 years ago as a rookie. Paulson Adebo is coming off the best year of his young career last year. In my opinion, he was the Saints' defensive MVP. So I don't think that this changes the Saints' approach. They believe in Kool-Aid McKinstry. I'm not where I'm not sure is, are they going to ask Paulson Adebo to shadow CeeDee Lamb whenever possible, like they would have with a healthy Lattimore? We saw Adebo shadow a little bit last year when Lattimore was out, but not extensively like we would see with Marshawn. So it would be very interesting, to see how they're going to guard CeeDee Lamb, because that is the focal point of the Cowboys passing attack, especially with starting tight end Jake Ferguson out. Yeah, Brandon Cooks is still a capable receiver. Jalen Tolbert is a solid option. The Kavontae Turpin, is a real dangerous, big play threat as well, and their primary punt returner. But Dak's going to look for CeeDee Lamb in the biggest situations, no question about it. CD being a veteran like he is, an accomplished veteran and a physical player, is Kool-Aid McKinstry going to be able to withstand that? Is Rico Payton going to be able to withstand that? So if I'm Dennis Allen, I might not shadow CD early on with Adebo, but in big situations, I would definitely grab 29 or even one Alontae Taylor and say, all right, the old basketball terminology coming out of the huddle. Paulson, Alontae, 88 is your man no matter where he goes. We'll take care of everything else. So I think that's a possibility, but I would be a little bit surprised if the Saints opened up with that strategy.
Well, and for you sports bettors out there, because we were just talking about CeeDee Lamb, I'll give you guys a little heads up with your plays for this week. Underdog has a special right now for CeeDee Lamb, and what they're calling a gimme pick of CeeDee Lamb for higher than half a total yard. So if you guys need a gimme pick, it is the promo, one of the promos this week for Underdog, CeeDee Lamb for higher than half a yard. Go ahead and throw that into your picks. Bob and I had a few picks this week that we're going to share with you real quick. Bob, we went back and forth about a couple of these, but if you guys want to tail it, this is what Bob and I selected for 6 picks. Taysom Hill higher than 6.5 receiving yards. Didn't have a reception last week. We don't get to say that a whole lot when it comes to Taysom Hill. And he was used heavily in the Saints offense, particularly as running back 2 for stretches of that game against the Panthers. But I could definitely see Hill slide out of the backfield on maybe some play action on a bootleg, get a catch, cut it upfield, and collect 7 yards. That would help you there with the pick. We also had Derek Carr for higher than 215.5 passing yards. In a blowout victory last week, he had 200. I think this is a game where if the Saints want to win, and the Saints are in a competitive ball game, they're going to need Derek Carr's arm to at least carry them into the fourth quarter. This is an interesting one. This is not Saints related, so woohoo. Changing it up, but another 1 o'clock game, and that is for the Niners against the Vikings. Jordan Mason all of a sudden is becoming a very popular player in fantasy football. He's becoming a very popular player when it comes to sports bettors, and we have Mason for at least so higher than half a rushing or receiving touchdown. So either or. That was a very popular play last year for Christian McCaffrey throughout the season. There are a lot of people who watched the game on Monday for the Niners think that Mason could fill a similar role. And because of the way that offense is structured, he's going to have to find the end zone a few times for the Niners to be successful. We have Justin Herbert for higher than 200.5 passing yards. We just saw what the Saints did to the Panthers. I don't see why the Chargers could not do the same thing in the Panthers' first home game of the season. We took DeAndre Swift higher than 49.5 scrimmage yards total. That's simply because who else is Chicago going to go to, right? And then finally, one that made me chuckle, and I sent this to you late yesterday, was Alvin Kamara higher than 1.5 first quarter receiving yards. So you are really just hoping Alvin Kamara gets a reception in the first quarter that goes forward. Those are our picks for this week. We may or may not have some news to share with you guys in the post-game show when it goes in regards to some of those picks. But more than anything, the most important part of all that for you guys was the gimme pick, CeeDee Lamb, for higher than half a yard. So you guys still got some time. Go ahead and get those picks in. Bob, let's flip it to the Saints offense. I teased a little bit there that in order for the Saints to be successful and be in this ball game, at least what I think is going to be a pretty close ball game, they're going to need to rely on Derek Carr, who statistically didn't have eye-catching numbers last week. But when you throw on the film, everything about his performance was eye-catching. What are you looking for out of Derek Carr here in week 2 against a very good Dallas pass rush, but a defense that has some question marks outside of that?
Yeah, they really do. I mean, first and foremost, the Saints, need to protect Derek Carr. But if you can, then Carr needs a similar performance to what he produced against Carolina. No, I'm not talking necessarily statistically, but more along the lines of what you were saying. He needs to be precise. He needs to be decisive going through his progressions. Because with DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons roaring off of the edge at you, you're not going to have 3.5, 4.5 seconds to throw. You have to go through those progressions quickly. So the onus is also on the Juwan Johnsons, the Chris Olaves, Rashid Shaheeds to give Derek Carr something to throw to very quickly as well. In other words, get instant separation. Especially when the Saints attack sideline to sideline, as we know that they're going to try to do against Dallas's defense. I'll give Carr an early target, and then allow your playmakers to make plays once they have the ball in their hands. So Derek, I mentioned precise. He has to obviously avoid bad throws, but also put the ball in position for his players to make plays on the run. Hit your receivers in stride. Allow them, hit them in ways where their eyes can be up the field. If you're Kamara, Shaheed, and Olave especially. and just allowed those players open field abilities to take over. I do expect some deep shots from the Saints, but I expect them to primarily attack horizontally and try to stretch that Cowboys defense from sideline to sideline. That would and should allow them to attack the Dallas defense with their running game a little bit more, rather, because if you're successful attacking sideline to sideline, everybody thinks you got to go deep to prevent a defense from dropping extra players down in the box. If you spread them side to side, that does the same exact thing, and that opens up deep shots down the course of the game as well.
Well, not having a guy like A.T. Perry today as well, being able to spread a defense sideline to sideline with guys like Alvin Kamara, guys like Taysom Hill, utilize the tight ends a little bit. I think this is an underrated game, and I may say this a lot throughout the year. So you guys that are consistently watching us week in and week out, just get ready to hear this a lot. I think this is an underrated game for Jamal Williams. I think, to your point, Bob, if they're able to stretch the defense sideline to sideline, create some a little bit more room in the middle, maybe take a guy out of the box, I could see a guy like Jamal Williams getting some body shot type carries, whether the Saints are leading or trailing, and creating opportunities for play action. And I said it during the preseason. I said it in week one. One thing that caught my eye that I didn't think would was there was something about Jamal where it looked like he was hitting the hole quicker in the preseason and in week one. It looked like there was more room between the gaps for him to run. There was almost just a refound energy with Jamal Williams in the preseason and in week one, just the way he was hitting holes. So again, I just see this being a game where if that type of game plan and that type of strategy works, we're able to stretch him, that he's going to have that same energy about him in this one. I want to talk about Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed real quick. So Olave not having a great week one in terms of statistics. Who cares when you win a game by 37, right?
Right. Well, unless you have them on your fantasy team like I did. But
right.
go on.
But then you're upset, right? Well, are you playing PPR? You got, 3 points out of PPR?
Yeah.
So, woo. But this is a week where you could definitely see him bounce back a little bit, be a little bit more involved. Shaheed, outside of the big shot touchdown, not a whole lot, not needing a whole lot out of your receivers. Again, you were up so much. Again, without A.T. Perry in this game, do you see this being a game that is going to fluctuate between the two in terms of usage, or do you see it going one way or the other where you could see one of those two guys finding some holes in the zones, getting the ball to him early a little bit more than the other?
I do think that we'll see it fluctuate between, the targets fluctuate between the two. Olave especially is going to get a lot more than the 2 targets that he got last week. We know that. We know that Chris Olave needs to be involved early and often. To keep, not that his head was not in the game last week, because like you said, they didn't need it. That didn't need to be a Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed football game, for the Saints to win. This one might have to be. And I'm not talking deep shots either. I go back to what I said before about really challenging the Cowboys from sideline to sideline, wide receiver screens, jet sweeps. We saw a little bit of that, from Shaheed. We saw Olave line up in the backfield a couple of times as well. So I don't think you need to chuck the ball, down the middle of the field or down, deep down the seam, to get these guys involved. You just got to get them the ball. And as far as who is going to get the lion's share of the targets, I do believe that Chris is going to get more than Shaheed. But Derek Carr actually seems to have a comfort level with both wideouts, which is obviously a very good thing. The Cowboys have a cornerback in Trayvon Diggs, who makes a lot of plays, but also gives up a lot of receptions. So you're not talking about a Marshawn Lattimore shutdown type of corner here, but he's still the best that the Cowboys have. And you don't want to test Diggs too much because you start poking that hornet's nest and you're going to get stung. Kalen Carson, a rookie 4th-round pick, and Jordan Lewis, a veteran, who's been around the block, but is a little bit limited against shifty, speedy receivers like we know Olave and Shaheed are. So I'm not saying throw away from Trayvon Diggs, but I am saying that dependent on what the Cowboys do with Diggs, and he's not the kind of player that shadows other receivers. But if he's lined up across from Olave, maybe that's not your first read. Maybe my first read is going to be to Shaheed to see how they bracket him. Or vice versa, but I do expect a lot of throws, to be in the direction of both Chris. A lot of plays to be centered around both Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed this afternoon.
I think what you said about Diggs is very important. You have guys that are considered ball hawks. You have guys that are considered shutdown corners. I think ball hawks may be used a little bit more for safeties. When I think shutdown corners, I think my mind automatically goes to a guy like Darrelle Revis, and that's not what Diggs is. Diggs is a gambler.
Mm-hmm.
And that first year, his rookie year, he gambled a lot, and the chips kept coming his way, if you will, for the poker reference. He came up with a lot of big plays for that Dallas defense. But one thing that did go unnoticed was that same year, he was number 1 in the league, or last in the league, depending on how you want to talk about it, in terms of yards given up in man-to-man coverage, or where you're the primary defender, closest defender to the man who caught the ball. I don't think that part of it gets talked about enough. He's a good corner. I think he's a guy that anybody in the NFL would love to have on their team. Right? Because at some point he's going to come up with a big play for you.
Yeah.
But you may also break a TV or two watching the game if you go throughout the whole season and he gambles a lot and gives out a lot of yards, a lot of scores, whatever. That's why I do think it's an interesting game for both those receivers, and why I pose that question to you. Finally, before we give some predictions and whatnot, let's talk about special teams, because we didn't last week. And then they so kindly reminded us that special teams or special forces are so important to winning football games. It's hard to sit here and talk about and try to predict how a kicker is going to do or how a punter is going to do in a ball game. But what are some things about the Dallas return men in particular that Saints fans should keep an eye out on? Especially as we're in week 2 of this weird new whatever they're calling it. I don't like it. I really don't. But like we said last week, it changes strategically how you go about things. The Saints did a really good job not kicking the ball through the end zone at all last week. I'm assuming that's the same strategy this week.
I don't know. It depends how much confidence the Saints have in their coverage units, and they obviously showed a lot of confidence last week. But Kevontae Turbin, returned a punt for a touchdown. I think it was a punt, but it was definitely a kick. Returned a kick for a touchdown against the Browns. He is an electric game breaker. Nearly as talented as Rashid Shaheed, and Saints fans know what Rashid Shaheed can do. Shaheed set up a score himself with a long punt return, an easy touchdown himself with a long return last week. So it wouldn't surprise me, if the Saints. I mean, you don't get. There aren't many coaches with the swagger of Darren Reese. So I do expect them to challenge the Cowboys kick return units. But you need good placement. I mean, obviously you need athletic and disciplined coverage units, but you need good placement on your kicks too, whether it's great Blake Groupie kicking off or Matthew Hayball on his punts. You use the sideline as an extra defender if you're punting the ball away. Give your coverage units a chance to close off lanes with higher kickoffs, things like that. So I do expect the Cowboys to challenge, Turpin and those Cowboy, return units. But that's a little bit of a dangerous roll of the dice too. It's one of those be careful what you ask for situations.
Well, let's move into score predictions and kind of how we think this game's going to go. I think we both think it's going to be a pretty tight game. When we talked on Wednesday, we seem to be in similar boats as you down your last little bit of coffee. I saw that. So we're going to be Bob's going to be on cup about 37 before kickoff. Is what it sounds like for just today. If we count the week, sidebar, Bob, if doctors knew how much coffee you consumed, they'd probably ask to see you like now, if they knew how much caffeine you had every day, and then every week, and then every year. We really need a counter. We really should have started that. Do you know how many you had last Sunday? Just keep a count. How many cups of coffee Bob has on game day? But regardless, we think and we know that if the Saints come out with the same energy that the caffeine is providing to Bob Rose, that they should be in good shape today. But the Cowboys are a team that a lot of people think are going to make the playoffs this year and potentially have a deep playoff run. And they're built to be a team that does so. As we joked on Wednesday, we're in the cycle of the Cowboys season where Cowboys fans truly believe that the Cowboys are going to go undefeated and win the Super Bowl. That's where we are in this process. And while I don't foresee that happening, I do think the Cowboys are a good football team. So, Bob, what are your predictions for the game? Not just score predictions, but how do you think this one is going to go?
I like the matchup that the Saints defense has against the Cowboys offense. But New Orleans really needs to come out aggressive, and not let up. They need to shut down the running game. As we mentioned before, you have to pressure Dak Prescott. If you don't, you will lose the football game. It's as simple as that. But I think that the Saints have the tools to do it. Chase Young might not have gotten Bryce Young on the ground last week, but he led all defenders with 6 quarterback pressures. The Cowboys know that. And they played against Chase Young several times when he was in Washington, so they know how talented he is. So if they're going to double team Chase Young, and I expect them to, then your Cameron Jordans, your Carl Grandersons, they have to make plays on the other side. You have to stay disciplined and prevent Dak from making any plays with his legs. And even without Lattimore, I still expect Joe Woods and Dennis Allen to be very aggressive, with the coverage of the Cowboys receivers. I expect Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor in particular to get up in those receivers' faces, because that's what they do. That's what they're best at. But it's going to be a fun matchup to watch. CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks, versus Alontae Taylor and Paulson Adebo. Watch the trenches, watch the pressure on Prescott, but you're going to be awfully tempted to watch that matchup in the secondary. On the other side, I'm going to be watching the tackles of the New Orleans Saints very, very closely. Talise Fuaga with his back, and see if Trevor Penning can carry over that positive play that he had last week, because the Cowboys are going to attack the New Orleans tackles like you wouldn't believe. Yes, we know DeMarcus Lawrence is very talented. We know that they will move Micah Parsons around. If Fuaga is showing struggling a little bit with that mobility, that's where Parsons is going to line up. If not, then they're going to try to match Micah up with Trevor Penning as often as possible, because Micah Parsons is the exact type of player that Trevor Penning has struggled in blocking one-on-one in his short career. And expect Dallas to bring some interior blitzes too. Interior blitzes and stunts. What that's going to do, that's going to pinch the New Orleans guards and Eric McCoy at center inside, and cause one-on-one matchups between Penning and Fuaga on the outside against Walker and Micah Parsons. So it's going to be a little bit of a chess game between the Dallas defensive coordinator Mike Zimmer and the Saints offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak, who, as we know, likes to run a lot of motion, likes to set up isolation matchups with formations. That's precisely the type of scheme that has given the Cowboys fits, and that's why I expect it to be a chess match. If Carr carries over his precision from last week, I think that Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Jawan Johnson have a big advantage in the Cowboys secondary. Who I don't see any standouts there outside of Trayvon Diggs. Alvin Kamara will be involved more as a receiver. He has to be, because and there's factors for Johnson and Taysom Hill too. Kamara will have such an advantage against a Cowboys linebacking core that is kind of athletically limited in space. So again, that's why I expect, like we both said earlier, this game, if you can keep Carr upright and establish your running game, you will be able to attack Cowboys coverage from sideline to sideline, and you're going to be able to break a few big plays. But we know the Saints. We know the Saints are coming off a sixth straight season opening win. Well, I got some scary numbers for you fans.
No, don't share. Don't do this, Bob. Don't do it.
I have to.
I know, but don't do it.
I
tried, guys. I tried. It's Bob's fault. It's not mine.
Of the previous 5 season openers, the Saints are 1-4, with the only win coming last year against Carolina. Now what really stuck out to me was how poorly the Saints played in week 2 in each of the last 5 years, even that win against Carolina last year. And that goes for defense. I'm sure you all remember the year where the Saints gave up 305 yards passing to Sam Darnold. I'll drop the mic right there. On offense, this team has given up 14 sacks in the last 3 years in week 2 and turned the ball over 9 times while averaging less than 95 yards rushing a game. The Saints have averaged 29 points in week 1 in the previous 5 years. In week 2, they've averaged 14 points. So all this means a couple of things to me. You have a team that's coming out very sloppy, very unmotivated, and completely unprepared. I know people want to blame that all on Dennis Allen. Sean Payton was responsible for 3 of those season openers too. It's not always all on the coaches. The defense or the team leaders, the Cam Jordans, the Mario Davises, Tyrann Matthews, they were all there for these. So it's on them as well, and the individual player to keep motivated, and sharp coming into this week 2, because, and this is a scary stat that I hope I don't have to throw out a lot this year. In those week 2 matchups, the Saints opponents had an average winning percentage of 386 for that particular year. They only played one team that ended that year with a winning record. Well, Cowboys are coming in at 1-0, and as you said, they've been a playoff team the last 3 years, 12-5 record each year. So Dallas is no slouch, and the Dennis Allen's New Orleans Saints are 3-11 when they face teams with a 500 or better record when they play them. All that stuff is going to have to be snapped today. But again, I like New Orleans in this matchup. The offense scares me. Is this the team that scored 47 points against Carolina last week? I mean, I doubt it, but I don't. I feel like it's trending in the right direction. But Micah Parsons is terrifying for me. I said it when this schedule came out. This week 2, when you have 2 new tackles and one who is teetering on being called a colossal bust. And you're facing a Micah Parsons in week 2. That terrifies me. But I think the Saints keep this one close. I think it's a very entertaining game. If this game were in New Orleans, I think that I would pick the Saints to win. But it's in Dallas, where the Saints are only 4-11, all-time record. Including their the last 2 times, losing the last 2 times they played there. I think the Saints can pull this out, and it certainly wouldn't shock me if they do. But I feel like the Cowboys are going to come away with a very entertaining 28-24 victory.
Hmm. You threw me for a loop on there. I thought you were definitely picking the Saints after a lot of that. I think what you said about the offense is so true. And Fear just threw a comment. So I don't do this. I haven't done this a whole lot lately, but I'm going to throw the comment on screen because I think this is a brilliant point and very well said, especially the back half. Today's game starts a stretch of games that will show who the Saints will be this year.
Yeah.
And not being sold on them, even though they threw up 47. So that's a great comment. And I said that on Wednesday, right? I said, or Thursday, whatever, we bend time so much. I don't even know, what day we do these sometimes. But I said that, yeah, like 47 is great, but is that going to be the team, the rest of the year that is first in pre-snap motion, that gets multiple running backs involved, that gets multiple receivers involved? Are we going to get a Derek Carr that was that precise throwing the football? Or are we going to revert back to the Saints of old that, that we just don't know whether or not they're an actual NFL offense or not? Like, we don't know. This is going to be a brilliant test. I like the Saints in this one. I like the matchups they have offensively, like you alluded to, Bob. You talked a lot about Micah Parsons. I think DeMarcus Lawrence is one of the more underrated.
He's a fantastic player.
And it's because he plays alongside a guy who we said earlier this week could very well be the defensive player of the year every year that he's healthy. But DeMarcus Lawrence could easily be the number one edge rusher on just about any other team in the league. So when you have those two guys going up, that's concerning. But there are ways to, you don't stop it, right? That old saying, you can't stop it, you contain it.
Mm-hmm.
There's ways to contain it. Some of that is getting the ball out quick to your playmakers in space, screens, bubble screens, etc. It is, like you said, stretching them horizontally, not vertically, right? There is throwing a lot of tight ends on both sides of the tackles. There is going to these jumbos and these bunch formations where you just rub the defensive end a little bit on the pass rush. Defensively, I like the Saints matchup. And we alluded to this, and Dalvin Cook was not activated for this game for Dallas. I don't really love like Ezekiel Elliott at this point in his career as your every down guy. And then you have a very young guy behind him, and you don't really know what you're going to get. I like the Saints matchup there. And like we also alluded to before, when it comes to Dak is really good when you're asking him to throw like no more than 35 passes a game. If this becomes a game where Dak has to use his arm to win the game, I say advantage Saints. So with all that,
he's the type of guy that can throw for 450 yards, but can also throw four interceptions in that same game.
Exactly. Well, he's great in play action. That's what made him so good early in his career, because Ezekiel Elliott was one of the best running backs in football early in his career, and they complemented each other really well. This version of Zeke does not complement Dak very well. Dak's got to show me that he's worth the money he got paid, right? That's kind of one of those games for Dallas as well. And I've been on record saying how much I like Dak Prescott, so that is not a shot at Dak Prescott. With all that said, I like the Saints in this game. I have faith that the offense still shows, I don't even want to say signs of life, but I have faith that the offense still shows progress. And I have faith that this defense, while down their number one corner, shows the depth that we talked about all offseason. So with that, I'm taking the Saints 24-21 in a very close game that will ultimately be decided by a make or missed field goal, since we talked about special teams. So that's where I stand with all of that. Bob, before we go, any final thoughts?
We kind of alluded to this on our weekly broadcast on Thursday. The Saints can go into Dallas and lose this game and still have a lot of us feeling pretty positive if they are competitive. Now I rolled out, their recent week 2 woes before. If they come out and play like that, like trash, then all of the naysayers, all of the criticisms, all of the worries about this Saints team that so many of us had coming into this year, all of a sudden creep back up. And they have a daunting stretch ahead of them. Eagles, Chiefs, Buccaneers, Falcons, etc. But I think if you go in and win this, certainly if you go in and win it, you all of a sudden have a lot of people talking about you, and your confidence is sky high. But I think if you go in and lose this game, but play well, go toe to toe with Dallas, you could still be feeling pretty good about yourself. And feeling pretty confident about your preparations for Philadelphia next week, and then the teams that they have following. So yeah, I'm looking for a good performance. Obviously, winning is very important. Especially against an NFC team. We know that the Saints have come up on the short end of tiebreakers in each of the last 3 years. But yeah, you're going on the road in the NFL. You're doing it against a playoff team. With some holes. Still on your roster, some perceived holes. You could still shut up a lot of that criticism that carried over from week 1. The Saints still aren't for real. They didn't play anybody. You go into Dallas and you make Dallas even sweat out a victory. That's going to change a lot of perception.
For me, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, even if you don't come out victorious in this game, you could still have a lot of Saints fans and media alike excited for the season. But the biggest thing is not losing people this early in the season.
That too.
So with all that, I am hopeful, like I said, that the Saints come out and play a good ball game. I'm hopeful that the offense shows that they are progressing to, I don't even say getting back to what they were, but being a good offense again. And that the defense continues to be strong. Bob, where can everybody follow you and all of your work as you have a little bit more to do before kickoff? And why don't you just tease us for our post-game show that will be exclusively on your favorite podcasting platform, Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff.
Yeah, Brendan and I will be doing a post-game show, but just like last week, we won't be doing it live. However, we'll be taping it this evening, and it will be available for your drive time or dress-up time or whatever you do in the morning, for work, for school, for everything else. So make sure that you tune in and keep a watchful eye for the Bayou Blitz post-game show. Will be available tomorrow morning through our own 2 personal pages, as well as the Bayou Blitz Facebook group. I mentioned our personal pages. You can follow me, Bob Rose, on Facebook, at Bobby R 2613 over on Twitter, and all of my written works are on my personal pages, as well as the Saints News Network and several other Facebook groups, where we also post our links to our Bayou Blitz shows.
For me, you can follow me virtually everywhere at BT Boylan. I'll tease it. Bob and I have some more exciting news to share with you guys in our post game. So we're excited about that. We're excited to continue to share in the coming weeks more information about the Saints Legends cruise that we teased a little bit last week and the week before. So we have a lot of exciting things going on, and we can't wait to share some of that with you, and we can't wait for you guys to listen to our post-game thoughts tomorrow morning. So guys, until then, I hope you guys enjoy the week 2 matchup. I hope all of you are safe, secure, and getting some much needed, I don't want to call it relief, but maybe some much needed time not thinking about storms after what a lot of you guys went through down in Louisiana this past week. So until you hear Bob and I's beautiful voices tomorrow morning, that's Bob Rose. I'm Brendan Boylan. Thanks so much for tuning into the Bayou Blitz pregame show. Hope you guys enjoy the game, and who dat?
Yeah.